Welcome to the Let's Get Real series. I'm Jenn Walsh, and today I have the joy of speaking with someone who lives at the intersection of leadership, connection, and outcomes, Lisa Hawker. As chair of the Council of Employee Benefits Executives, CB, advisors within the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, CIAB, Lisa is a convener of voices and a champion of what's possible when we work better together. She's also one of my dearest friends. Our conversation today is inspired by an article I wrote for Leaders Edge, where I raised a concern. Brokers and carriers can only solve big problems together, but what happens when the relationships that partnership depends on are being challenged? Today, we're exploring how joy, trust, and execution by all parties all play a role in that answer. Welcome, Lisa, to episode 1 of Let's Get Real.
Thanks, Jen. Great to see you. I'm glad that you started that with joy because you know that is my word, that is my passion. So excited to have the conversation today. I mean, it feels like this is a conversation that's not just personal, but it's incredibly urgent for what we're going through right now. You and I have both lived through the highs and lows of broker carrier partnerships. Your article, what really stood out to me was that solving any type of client problems on any sort of scale is way beyond just transaction and coordination. It requires trust, it requires shared accountability, and a deep mutual respect. That's how we've got to start talking about the conversation in more than areas of a conference or a leadership meeting. It's got to be every day.
We're asking clients to take some risk. Big moves get big results. We know our clients have a lot of big problems, and this is a big group exercise, if you want to think about it, this big group project between carriers, brokers to actually execute on the promises that are being made in the sales process all around.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's getting harder. I mean, it's getting harder every day. You know, COVID sent us into a whole new world where we started to hide behind video screens. We started to hide behind emails, and we just don't have those same shared experiences where you can have the water cooler conversation or you're out to lunch with someone. It changed the way we work. Throw into that, our industry is aging, and so we've got a lot of retirements. We've got a lot of new folks coming in. Our teams are dispersed. So that building of trust and that creation of relationship, it has to look different, and we've got to evolve. We have to evolve on how we create that, because if we don't, we're going to lose the opportunity to innovate. We're going to lose our client in the mix because they're going to start to see us as really just a more transactional being. And that really isn't how we get anything done in this business. And you know that.
That's a perfect transition. We're evolving as an industry, yet one of the things we have all heard at any point of our career is that this is a relationship business. It's a relationship business with our customers and also between the carriers and the broker. And so how do we hold on to that? What is the importance, just as you reflect on your career and your goals moving forward?
I think it's interesting because as you relate in your article and as we're talking about here, like it's changed. The nature of relationships have changed. So I think the way we have to hold on to it is we really have to stop, I guess I'll say, romanticizing the past. And we've got to start really taking a look at how do we systematize trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so trust is built a little bit differently, but it's still based on age-old tradition, right? You're transparent, you honor your commitments, you invest in having real relationships that go beyond the phone call of something's going really well or the phone call of something's going really wrong. So those investments, again, whether they're done virtually, they're done through phone calls, that investment is key to ensuring that the future doesn't actually take a step back from where the past was.
A myth I believe exists out there is that relationships take a long time to build. And in our Client Service Academy recently, we invited our participants to nominate the carrier reps that deserved a round of applause. We just felt like we needed to put a little bit of good back out into the ecosystem. And when they made the nomination, I asked them to tell us how long they had been working together. And over half of the nominations were individuals who had worked together for less than a year. So I was inspired by that and thought maybe we could riff on that for a minute, because sometimes I think whether you're a new account manager or account executive or a new carrier rep, you're looking in your office thinking, oh, well, Tom and George have worked together for 20 years. And so it's going to take me 19 more years to get there. And that's just not been what I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, I would actually say it's the opposite. I would actually say relationship is built kind of immediately because trust is established very quickly.
Ah,
Relationships grow over time, and so they become more intricate, they become more involved. But really, they say you never have a second chance to make a first impression. In my mind, that's a little bit it. That
mhm.
first few interactions where you are seeing someone did what they said they were going to do, or I felt like they heard me and that I was listened to, or we found some little commonality, whether it's kids, whether it's business. So, I've always kind of felt that relationship is sparked very quickly, and then the intricacy and the does it stand the test of time? Some of them do, and as we both know, some of them don't.
I love that. So if somebody's new in their role, an event, that first interaction with the other business partner, that's where your relationship is now. And so then
Absolutely.
it's consistency and what becomes a pattern, and then what deepens over time.
Yeah.
I really like that. The other question I wanted to ask you to weigh in on is the idea of how many people have the relationship, because there are some historical ideas in our business about there's the client main stakeholder, right? Relationship manager or whatever somebody wants to call it. And so everybody else, either at the carrier or the broker, I don't want to say subservient, but they almost cede the relationship to one person. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and advice you might have for anyone who thinks that's how the structure works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty naive if I'm really honest about it. So, is there a primary stakeholder, or is there that executive, again, whether it's on the broker side, the carrier side, or the client side, there is that person that sits in some place of authority, but the relationship goes much deeper.
Right.
If you think about on the client side, it's all the way down to the person that processes ads and terms. That person could be the most instrumental person in the entire process. The client service person that is administering and reviewing contracts or ensuring that every little claims question gets answered, that person is instrumental. So the idea that a relationship just sits with one person in any ecosystem, like a client broker partnership or client broker carrier partnership, I think it's just naive. Now, are there places where power might be ceded a little bit or decision making might be ceded? I think so, but I think we've just got to recognize that every person in that ecosystem plays an incredibly important role, and therefore we've got to be really mindful of creating trust at all points, doing what we say at all points. You can't make promises up here and then break them down here and think that it's okay because what I said up here is still good. So I think that honoring that ecosystem, I don't do sports analogies. I'm a biology major by background, so I'll stick with my biology, but it's truly an ecosystem, and there are multiple organisms within that ecosystem, all play an important role, all have to be there in order for the relationship to work.
That is a perfect transition to the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is the importance of implementation. If we want to get big results for our customers, and the carriers put together products, they've appropriately priced it, they've pitched it to the broker consultant to bring forward to the client, that ecosystem continues. It's very hard to recover from a failed implementation. So I thought, building on our relationship discussion, what role does everybody play in getting the customer, and in our case, in the employee benefits world, their employees and dependents, what everybody anticipated from the jump?
Yeah, I think what we have to recognize is that everybody does play a specific role. And first and foremost, in that implementation process, it's defining those roles. Because if we don't define the roles, it's very easy to get into the not me standpoint. And that's, I think, where things can often go wrong, is that we don't start out by delineating who's doing what and
Right.
being really clear about it. And then we often end up in this kind of sales versus service dynamic where one takes their hat off and says, I'm kind of done with this, and turns it over to service. But yet maybe there were expectations set that didn't get communicated, or the handoff didn't go just as we expected. So, in my mind, implementation is where relationships and loyalty are won or lost. And so if we don't hit our expectations there, if we don't create excellence there, we're always playing catch up, and that's almost impossible. And so, how do you do that? Well, you do have to set those those roles, and you have to be pretty clear on it, and also understand that life happens, and if you need to shift, that you can shift. But just, it's communicate, 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 and then, dare I say, communicate.
I know. Clarify and verify is
Yeah.
what we'll often say. And it's interesting in a business where, from an agent broker perspective, our role is to protect our client from risk. Inherently, this bumps up against the realities of friction that accompanies the implementation of any new idea. And I've observed carrier reps and brokers, when I say not being honest, it's not from an ethical standpoint. It's that they almost don't want to be as direct as they should be with the client about what it's going to take to get from here to there, which in the end doesn't serve anyone. There are ways we might roll it out because the client has accountability in this too. Do you have any advice for individuals who might be holding back, but then time is not our friend, right?
Right.
If things don't get done.
I think you hit it on the head. I mean, that's the thing that, you get so excited. Let's say it's a new client, right? You got the excitement of new client. I don't want to disappoint. I don't want to push them too hard. Look, I just got this. This is like this new little neophyte that I have. I don't want to upset the apple cart. And it just it doesn't set the relationship up for success. So what I would say to anybody in that is, be clear. But I'll use my Brene Brown, right? Clear is kind,
Yeah,
unclear is unkind. And so when we think we're being kind by, I don't want them to think it's going to be too hard. Guess what? It's hard.
right,
And if we don't set the expectation of, this has to happen before this happens, then as soon as one little thing goes wrong, it just becomes a domino effect.
right,
And so time is of the essence in every one of these. We never start, there's never enough time to do a perfect implementation. In my opinion, it doesn't matter. There's never enough time. I don't care how much time you give. And so, I'll go back to that kind of communicate, communicate, communicate. It's set the expectation, reiterate the expectation, and explain what happens if it doesn't happen. I think that's the piece we miss sometimes. We just go, we need this. We need a clean census. We need to have open enrollment done by this time, or, pick whatever that item is. But what we haven't done, or what we fail to do because we don't want to ruffle any feathers, is say, and if it doesn't, these things will fall from there. And I think just that clarity would create, I'd rather have a little friction up front, I guess I would say, and say, well, I don't think I can do that. Well, then let's get honest. If you can't hit this deadline, client, and
right.
I get it, right? They're wearing 50 hats. If I can't do this, okay, then let's just be really clear about what the time frame is, and know that we either have to come in on the back end and shorten up some other time frames,
Right.
or that things aren't going to be as smooth. And I think that is is essential. I mean, how many times have we been through implementations where, we start off, oh, we started at 90 days, or we started at 120 days, and then all of a sudden, like, why are we still rushing?
Right,
Because something
right.
goes wrong in the middle. So something's going to go awry. Set the expectations where you can. Control the controllables.
Well, how many times does somebody put out a service calendar or here's our renewal calendar, but putting it out there but not sticking to it are two different things.
Right.
And I often think if we go back to the scene of the crime in that renewal meeting when clients' decisions were being made, if a broker's team in that moment, whether it's their PowerPoint or whatever documents they're referring to, it said, if decisions are made by this date, this is what's going to happen. Option B or plan B is if it's made by this date, this will happen. If we had that to work off of, it would set everybody up for success. Sometimes even it might be your VP of benefits and HR who they need that deadline in
Yeah.
order to get the CFO to
Yeah.
sign off on things. So that actually is helpful to them. We have a saying in our academies, firm can be friendly. And under our framework of clients hire you to be led, I think to our ecosystem discussion, that starts with the carrier leading the broker. Sue, I know you and Ted are excited about getting this implemented for the client, and it is going to get them the financial results they want. It will require to do X by Y, them to do A by B. And my commitment to you is if we all do that, this is what we should expect to happen. And always acknowledging that there will be some friction and it's okay because we'll be prepared to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You think
Setting
about,
everybody up for success.
yeah, you think about that. So it's the broker is the client of the carrier. The
Right.
client is the client, the employer is the client of the broker. And so when you have multiple layers of friendly yet not firm, then that's where kind of the breakdown occurs. And I think you're
Super.
spot on. Is everybody's so busy just kind of smiling about it, and we can make this happen, and rah rah, we've got this. That firmness, I love that concept that firm is friendly, because you're right. I mean, firm is a friction reducer in the whole process.
I owe it to you. So if you're my client, I can pick up the phone and I can be empathetic. You've got two people out on leave, or your company's doing an acquisition or riffs. But I'll say, Lisa, I owe it to you to be honest. I'm growing concerned that the deadline is slipping. And sometimes we have to remind clients that carriers and some of our Ben admin systems, we can't be as nimble as we used to
Yeah,
be.
it's true.
And so being really upfront and what else can I take off your plate so that you can get
Yeah,
your part done. As we think about how important all this is, sales at the carrier, sales at the broker, client service, both places, client at the center. I wonder how the impact of how we are working influences the entire environment. And what I'm getting with there is our legacy kind of carriers coming into the office, everybody spending more time in person together has evolved in most markets. So,
yeah.
how do we tackle that? What are your thoughts around remote work and relationship building?
It's tough, right? I mean, we've lost things that are, in my mind, probably a little bit irreplaceable.
Mhm.
We've lost, I'll call it the hallway handshake. Even the post meeting, like vent sessions where we're able to step outside,
Right.
get it off our chest, move on. We've lost what I'll say is proximity. And so with it, I think we've lost a little bit of empathy, and that empathy and intuition, that's what builds trust. That's what builds understanding, because it's from that shared experience. And so we have to think about, when we don't have proximity, we have to replace that with intentionality. We
Mhm.
have to be intentional about building connections. And it takes sometimes more effort than it used to, but I think it's more important than ever before.
Right.
So that means we have to not hide behind emails. It
Absolutely.
it means we have to pick up the phone, not just when things are going right, but when things are going wrong. And I would say, just as important as those things, it's actually taking that intentional time to create a relationship beyond the business. When you build relationship, and I know you can't see it, but behind me are some guiding principles that my old team we created, and one of them was relationships above all. Some people are like, "Whoa, why would you say that?" I'm like, because when you're in relationship, you've got trust. You can make mistakes. You can have a
Yeah.
bad day. You can misspeak. You can
You can say
blunder.
no. I
You can
mean,
say no. You can say, I'm not happy with you. Jen, I'm angry at you. You can
right,
say that, and that's
right,
okay.
right. And it was interesting. I referenced earlier the carrier nominations from our participants. One of the themes that came through were account managers, account execs who acknowledged the deepest relationship is when the carrier rep would call me and say, we just can't take a run on this one. We
Yeah.
have to DTQ. And I think some people would go into it thinking great relationships mean always getting the yes. And it's similar to training we do, which if there's a claims issue with a client and I take it to the carrier, I can still be a great advocate for my client. And the correct answer is no,
Yeah.
according to, the contract.
Yeah. Yeah.
And working together there, having those conversations. You used the word effort earlier. I think sometimes people equate effort with like hours and it being more work. It's intention, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
and being thoughtful. Exercise we've had people do is to interview carrier reps, and it's
I love that.
disclosed how infrequently, or disclosed or exposed, how infrequently people are talking to each other.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
It,
Well, and I want to go back to something you just said, like, the power of no, the importance of no. So if you think about one of the deepest relationship you have is with your child.
right,
If you said yes to your kid for everything, that isn't out of care. That's out of ease. That's out of, because first of all, that it isn't always yes. It shouldn't always be yes. It gets to be no. And so I think about it the same way. Like if I think about relationship, if I think about deep care, you said earlier, I I owe it to you to tell you, or I care enough about you
right.
to give you that hard information. It's the same thing with getting to know. I mean, you have to be able to care. If you're in a real relationship, you care enough. That doesn't mean you're best friends, but you care enough to be candid and honest, and no gets to be an okay answer.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about this when we started talking, but as leaders convene at EBLF, this annual opportunity for leaders of large agencies and brokerage to meet with leadership from carriers, often when they gather, what gets the headline are like the anecdotal, like the stories of the one the one client that went upside down or got awry, and everybody talks about aspirations of building this partnership. I do think that with so much changing in this competitive talent market for both carriers and brokers, I'd encourage everyone to be honest here about where things are broken.
Yeah.
There are some carriers who are reluctant to be honest with agencies about where maybe some of their teams are undertrained, or, it's good people
Yep.
working hard, but there's some gaps there. As a leader in the business, any reassurance you could provide carriers about your willingness or openness to get that perspective? Because some are afraid to
Yeah.
share what's going on.
Wow. I guess there's this part of me that just goes, as leaders at that level, we have to not be afraid. We
Right.
have to not be afraid. If we spend the time we spend at EBLF just placating each other and glad handing, then that is a wasted week. And that is not good for us. That's
Right.
not good for those carrier partners. And that's not good for our clients. So, get real is all I can say. The other thing is that I think in going into those meetings, and this has come from years of doing it and getting better and getting better. It's getting all of the important feedback on both sides, carrier partner side and broker partner side, from the teams when you go in. And when I say teams, I don't mean just look at your book of business and see how much revenue we have together, what's our win loss percentage. I mean feedback. So and so's, in these regions, these reps are great to work with. And that means on the broker side, getting that from service. Don't just ask the producers who took them to
Right.
golf last or whatever. It's
Right.
we're finding implementation to be a real pain here, and that's making it hard for us to write business with you. I don't care how competitive you are, because whenever anybody calls me, but we were so competitive. I'm like, then let's ask ourselves why. If you were the most
Right.
competitive, don't know if you were or not, because usually I'm not involved in the conversation until I get the big phone call. But if you were really the most competitive, then we've got to ask ourselves why you're not winning,
That's right.
because there's usually something else.
Because if underneath it, the team knows that might be a good contract for my client, but that will require 20 to 40 hours extra babysitting
Yeah.
implementation because the carrier doesn't invest in implementation resources, or I can't, with a degree of confidence, reassure my client
Yeah.
that they will execute on what they say, that becomes an expensive business partnership, right? So,
Yeah.
yes, we placed a lot of premium, or someone thinks that there's a gap there, you should have put more. It's like, well, but you cost us money every time we work with you.
Yeah.
Our clients
Well,
are displeased, right?
it's fascinating. I think back to a conversation you and I were having, completely unrelated topic, but it resonated so much when we were having it, and it resonates here. Inaction or exclusion, that's a really strong form of feedback. And, so it's kind of like, why isn't it working? Well, your pricing's there,
Right.
our premium volume's there, you have a relationship with the producer, client executive on a strong level. So there's something in the gap,
Right.
right? And
There's
I do think
we're
that was
so used
fascinating.
to vocal producers or the vocal client service leaders that I mean, stats don't lie, as I
Yeah.
learned in my house with
Yeah.
all the sports. There's a lot of sports
There's
talk
a lot
in
of
my
sports.
house, but stats don't lie, and often we have a lot of silent protesters. So the reality is, if business is not being placed or renewed, getting curious about what's really going on there is the key. I'd love to invite you to share just closing thoughts, advice as we think about the importance of these relationships at all levels of all the organizations.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Jen, and thanks for including me in this. It's really always an awesome opportunity to talk to you, and I think we could probably do this for hours on end, and sometimes we do. I guess I would say this, that we all can. I'd like to believe everyone considers themselves an integrous person, and we go in with the best of intentions, but you know. The old phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think it becomes getting real getting real by getting real. I mean, I think that's really how relationships are built. It's not just in the fact that we have fun together. It's not just in what we want to do. It's being able to and willing to talk when it's hard,
Right.
tell the brutal truth. You know, you can tell the brutal truth and do it kindly. I mean, I think sometimes we also get in this thing where the only time you hear that negative feedback or that constructive criticism, it's in a loud voice and it sounds like somebody's in trouble, as opposed to just
Right.
like it's just information. Without information, we can't make changes. Without information, we can't process. Without information, we just stay stagnant. And so going into EBLF and thinking through how we approach all those relationships at every level is just it's critical. And if we can't be candid, we're really not in relationship.
That's right. We owe it to each other, share beyond premium and competitive rates and number of quotes. It's to say, I want your company to be successful, right? So whether it's the carrier
Yep.
to the broker, broker to the carrier, you have good people. I'll often say there are no villains here. I mean, it's an outlier. We've been around for a long time. Once in a while, there's a bad actor, but that's not usually what's at play here. It's to say, love that you are investing in bringing in a lot of new sales talent. And this business has gotten a lot more complex. What we're seeing are some gaps, and this is the impact it's having on our organization. And so it's making it harder to do business with you, and we want to do more business with you.
Yeah.
So how do we help each other? And if people could approach conversations like that with specifics from the standpoint of not gotchas, but to help people learn and avoid self-inflicted wounds, would be a lot more productive.
Yeah, I agree, Jen, and I'll put a little bit of a plug in, unsolicited plug in, because you said earlier how much more complicated the business is, and so we often spend a lot of time investing in sales, investing in sales, investing in sales, and it's important. It's a growth engine, but you can't grow if you can't keep what you have. And the more and more that falls onto those service staff folks, aligning them so that they too, I think in the past, they've just kind of been, Susie's been sitting in her cube and like waiting for someone to tell them what to do. The more they become empowered, and what you're
Right.
doing through your Client Service Academy and your AE Academy, empowering them to have the tough conversations, making sure that they're learning that their voice is important, and actually as much helping them to train the producers who
100%.
really think their voice is important. They're both important. And I think the work that you're doing there is essential to everything we've just talked about. Everything around relationship building, everything around client execution. It's got to be at all levels of the organization, from leadership to the person that's just come in the door and is figuring out what the heck a deductible is. And so it's an evolving business. It's an exciting business. I used to say it wasn't sexy, but it's pretty sexy.
And
But it's exciting.
they tease me because when we kick off our academies, I'll say, despite how chaotic the world is, despite how overwhelming it may seem with the complexity of our business, there has never been a better time to be in it if you can stay centered and focused on the fact that there is a lot more in your control than you might think. And so as we wrap up in our Let's Get Real, my advice to anyone watching and listening to think about the role you play in relationships, and where you're frustrated, get curious about where you can strengthen ties and deepen the impact that you can make for your customers. So thank you
Absolutely.
for coming and joining episode 1,
Well,
Lisa
thanks for
Hooker.
letting me be real. I just appreciate it.
Always. All right. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.